If you weren't excited for EA College Football 25 before the Dynasty Deep Dive, you better be now. Based on everything we saw and the 17,000 words EA gave us, this has the makings of being the best and most in-depth Dynasty we've ever had. In fact, I would argue that it already is, and I absolutely cannot wait. The good thing is we only have a couple weeks left before we can get our hands on this. So let's break down everything we learned today and what it means for Dynasty Mode. Let's start with the coaching. It is in-depth, and it's going to take a while to build your guy and your staff up. Now, most of this information comes from the EA College Football Campus Huddle from their website in the Deep Dive article. So all coaches will start with a base class or coach archetype, which can be thought of as your special ability in a traditional RPG. Just like our real-life coaches, the base archetypes fall into three categories: recruiting, motivation, and scheme. Recruiting obviously speaks for itself. Motivation, think player development and program culture, and scheme is the on-field X's and O's. From your base archetype, you can progress in multiple ways. You can become an expert in a singular category like recruiting, where you become an elite recruiter and excel in recruiting but are a little weak in other areas on the field. Or you can become a hybrid coach who is strong in multiple areas. The example they gave is a talent developer who is great at both talent acquisition, so recruiting, and player development, motivation. The ultimate goal is to become a program builder or CEO atop of the world of college football. And they'll get into this in a little bit, but it seems like there are three what they call master archetypes: program builder, CEO, and scheme guru. Those are the three things where each archetype has its master ability, and those three are very important, and that's essentially what you're trying to build to. Achieving an elite archetype like program builder or CEO is a combination of on-field success and ability progression. There is no single formula to reach these statuses. What they want you to know is there is no meta. However you want to get to these, you get to them in the way you want to play. There's going to be no path forward that's easiest or hardest. So, pick the path that you want to play, whether it's recruiting, motivating, or being an elite X's and O's guy. You'll be able to mix and match different ability combinations and progression paths, leading to strong customization. Purchasing an archetype with coach points unlocks new sets of abilities as well as new opportunities in the coaching carousel, which they get more into later. And additionally, each archetype has a perk when it's active. For example, a tactician has the winner perk, which awards additional coach XP every time you win a game. They're also introducing more than 50 coaching abilities, and each ability has up to 4 tiers, and every tier has a purchase cost associated with it. Every archetype, with the exception of Scheme Guru, Program Builder, and CEO, so the master ones, has their abilities broken down by position group. And I really like that they did this because in NCAA 14, or even the ones prior to that, it was in every single position. So if you were a great recruiter, you were a great recruiter at everything. It wasn't like you did DBs really well or wide receivers really well. It was, hey, if there's a 5-star defensive lineman or a 5-star quarterback, I'm going to be able to get them both equally. So I really like how they've added that into this. It adds a little bit of specialization. It makes it a little bit tougher. They go on to say, no longer is a coach great at recruiting across the board. Coaches will specialize in specific position groups, making your staff composition that much more important. So they get into this a little bit later, but your coordinators are super important for filling in your gaps. So you get those position-based boosts, but there are also coach abilities with core gameplay effects so you can really cook. Their words, not mine. For example, the Scheme Guru archetype focuses on your gameplay style. If you're a coach who likes to play fast, you can upgrade fast tempo offense, providing you with the following boosts. So they go through them. It's battery pack tier 1, caught napping is tier 2, on their heels is tier 3, and tipped your hand is tier 4. So all of those will give you an actual gameplay boost. So for example, the tier 3 is team composure boost for first downs gained while running hurry up. So every time you get a first down while running hurry up, you get a little composure boost so your guys relax a little bit on the next play. And the tier 4 one is going to be pretty good if you can get to that. You can see the defense's coverage shell if you go hurry up. But you can also do the inverse of that and make sure your team doesn't commit penalties and work against themselves. They're unfazed by home field crowds. And you can do that by upgrading discipline and communication abilities. So in this instance, your tier 3 offensive players will commit slightly fewer penalties. Your tier 4 offensive players will commit significantly fewer penalties. So those things are what you have to look out for when you get into these archetypes and look at the abilities that you can upgrade. You really have to focus it on how you want to play the game, which is what I really love from what I've seen so far. It's so customizable to, who you are as a person and how you want to play the game. They want to keep the game balanced too, so they added defensive counters to all of the offensive play style abilities. If your defense is looking a little suspect or you're tired of getting punched in the mouth by a physical ground and pound team, you can upgrade your ground and pound defense to become a stout run defense and reduce the effects of a physical offense continuously running the football. The program builder and CEO archetypes are different in that they are only available to head coaches. So you can't have them as coordinators, but you can have the scheme guru as both coordinators on offense and defense. The abilities within those archetypes are diverse and range from roster management and program culture to home field advantage and recruiting pipeline boosts. And just like the real world, no coach can be great at everything. So there's really a rock, paper, scissors relationship and dynamic between coach types, and there's no dominant progression path. The coordinators and how you build your staff are going to matter. They will fill in your weaknesses. So basically, if you like to ground and pound as an offense, you're an offensive guy, you can do one of two things. You can either make it so that your offensive coordinator is good at throwing the football, is a pass-oriented type of guy, and really make a well-rounded offense, or you can make him a run guy, and you can stack some of those abilities, which we'll get into it a little bit, and make it an elite rushing offense. Some other things I noticed, XP system works pretty much the same. You get points for winning games and rivalries. You get points for touchdowns and first downs and however many yards you have. You also get points for recruiting. So if you sign a 5-star recruit, you get points for that. You'll get points for a top 10, top 5 class. So pretty similar XP system as an NCAA 14. And once you purchase an ability, you can't take it back. So this is another thing. You have to be so certain how you want to play this game and how you want your coach to essentially coach, because you can't take it back once you do it. Now, if you do it, you can always go a different path. So say you only get the tier 1 upgrade. You can always say, hey, actually, I don't want this, and just focus all your other points on the other traits and abilities. But if you get it, it's yours. You can't unbuy it like you could in NCAA 14, where at the end of the offseason or in the middle of the offseason, you could reset your coaching tree and focus on something else. The example they used was with a defensive coordinator, but it was having the quarterback icy veins ability, which boosts your quarterback's composure at the beginning of the game, will have a smaller effect than an offensive coordinator owning it. So if you as a head coach have that icy veins ability for your quarterback, you will get a little bit of a boost there if it's your defensive coordinator. But if it's your offensive coordinator, it'll like double the impacts that it has, or, X times it, but more than your defensive coordinator. So it's really important that if you can find offensive coordinators that match your archetype and your traits, those get extra boost to your players. Your coordinators will automatically progress their archetypes and abilities. This is important. You cannot control what your coordinators purchase in terms of abilities. They do it on their own. So it's really important that you hire guys that you like their base archetype, whatever they are and what traits they have, because you can't control what they have. So if you get a coordinator who is really good at throwing the football and creating that scheme, you're not going to be able to change him into a run-heavy guy. He will likely upgrade those passing traits and abilities, so you have to be ready for that when you look for these coordinators, which you can change and we'll get into in a little bit. Each coach will have a unique spider graph based on the abilities and archetypes they own, so you can get a quick look at what coaches are specialized in certain places and what they do well, whether a motivator, or a recruiter, or a scheme guy. So I really like that addition. I think that it's, quality of life type thing. It'll make your life so easy when you're trying to find coordinators who match what you're trying to do. They even have this cool overlay where they take yours, the offensive coordinator, and the defensive coordinator spider graph, and it puts it on top of each other so you can see what abilities you have match and where, so you can focus on those. Another cool thing I saw, and I don't know how important this is going to be for a lot of people, but you can play as a defense as an offensive coordinator and vice versa. So if you want to start as a DC, you can still have control over the offense. I don't know how that's going to affect where you get hired, but I did find that interesting because it's not that way in NCAA 14. There are 4 types of contracts expectations, but if you don't meet them, you can be fired. However, you can also turn that setting off if you want to. The 4 types of contract expectations are winning X amount of games, so that target win goal that NCAA 14 had, winning a conference championship, making the college football playoff, and winning a national championship. So job security is a function of your ability to meet your contract expectations. Every win and loss counts towards that expectation. With that being said, not all wins are created equal. Beating a higher-ranked team will have a larger impact than beating one of those generic FCS teams. And similarly, losing to a generic FCS team is not a good look. I really like this because it felt like in NCAA 14, even if you beat a higher-ranked team, it didn't really matter. It didn't really matter who you beat as long as you beat them. It's like when you were looking at your job security, your AD would say, oh, great job getting that win, whether it was an FCS school or your rival. You want that rivalry to matter more. You want that game to have more meaning and matter more to your job security than the FCS team. So I think that's a really cool addition that they've made. At the end of your contract, the school will evaluate whether or not they want to extend your contract based on your performance. If you are offered an extension, you will be notified that the school has decided to extend your contract and it will be automatically accepted. But don't worry, the automatic acceptance of contract extensions does not mean that you are unable to change jobs. It was like that in NCAA 14 as well. In College Football 25, we set out to recreate the chaos that is the college football coaching carousel, along with the domino effects it brings. Now, instead of happening over a single week, the coaching carousel takes place over the course of 5 weeks from Conference Championship Week to the end of bowl season, just like the real world. Additionally, the carousel is now an asynchronous experience where each user can evaluate their offers without the need to wait on someone else. That way, in your multi-user online dynasty, the entire carousel experience won't be held up because you're sitting around waiting for your friend to get on and evaluate their job offer, only for them to tell you that they want to stay at their current job. Really love this. You will be offered jobs during Conference Championship Week and later, so it's every week you get offered jobs. So you'll get notifications in week 1 if you get offered any jobs. But if you don't, just sim and look again in week 2. Eventually, you're going to get something. Each school has a school persona which determines what they are looking for in their next coach. Schools will evaluate candidates across the following criteria. Level. The higher a coach's level, the more powerful they are and the more abilities they have. Schools are always looking for the highest caliber coach they can find. Scheme. Certain schools, like the military academies, want a coach who runs a specific style of offense or defense. So it sounds like with that, Army, Navy, and Air Force will only hire coaches who run the triple option offense. Archetype. Schools have a preference on the type of coach they are looking to hire, just like the real world. Blue Bloods prefer elite coaches who are a program builder or a CEO. Seems like those two are the big archetypes they keep mentioning and probably are the best in the game, program builder, CEO. Maybe the scheme guru isn't exactly, the best one. We'll have to wait and see when the game comes out, but the way they're kind of pushing out program builder and CEO, it kind of makes it sound like those are the top two. Pipelines. This is an interesting one. All coaches have a primary pipeline which provides a boost in recruiting. This is meant to simulate an area of the country where they have strong ties and relationships in recruiting. Schools prefer coaches whose primary pipeline is the same as one of the school's recruiting pipelines. So we'll get into the pipelines in a little bit, but this is also very important. So if you don't have Metro Atlanta as one of your pipelines and you're trying to get a job at Georgia, you might not get it because they love Metro Atlanta. It's such an important pipeline for their program. If you don't have it, they might not hire you. Coach prestige. A coach's prestige is compared against the school's team prestige. A 5-star program is not going to hire a coach who's mid and only a C- coach prestige. This is another good one. It should be harder to get one of those top-tier jobs than just 2, good seasons at those like mid-tier schools. You should actually have to work for it, and I like that they've added this. You'll also be able to get an idea of what jobs are coming open by looking at top candidates for other jobs. So they'll have a list of the top 3 candidates, and one of the 3 listed will accept a job. So one of those 3 jobs is going to be coming open in the next week of the coaching carousel, which can be another job that you get. This is an interesting one. You can poach coordinators from other schools starting week 1 of bowl week, but you have to fire current coordinators of Conference Championship Week. Otherwise, you're stuck with them unless they get hired away by a different school. There is also no guarantee a coordinator you offer will accept it, and you're only able to give 1 offer per week to both an OC and a DC. If at the end of the carousel you have not been able to fill an open position, you will be automatically given a new coordinator that's on par with the caliber of your program. So while they were building this recruiting process, they talked to former coaches and players and recruiting experts to figure out what recruiting and roster management was like in the current era. The motivations of a player, what causes players to transfer, what differentiates a big-time program from a smaller school when it comes to how they operate on the recruiting trail and some of the resources that they have available to them. So basically, they wanted to know anything and everything about recruiting and program management. Love to see the detail and the depth they went to make sure this was a realistic experience. So their quantitative research ranged from how many 5, 4, and 3-star prospects there are every year to what makes a California quarterback different from a Florida quarterback. I love that. They focused heavily on different geographic regions and what they are known for, as well as researching the recruiting journeys of hundreds of prospects. So they go on to talk about what their goal was with this system and what they tried to accomplish. Players liked the recruiting in older games because it had depth, but it was also tedious at times. On the contrary, the latest iteration was fast, but it was also shallow and cold. You never actually felt like you were establishing a relationship with a prospect. We wanted to find a way to blend the two so that recruiting felt meaningful and allowed you to build a connection with recruits through discovery while also being conscious of your time each week. Ultimately, they landed on 4 core goals when building your program. Humanize recruits by giving them unique needs and motivations that the player has to discover by interacting with the recruit. Differentiate regions of the country by player caliber, quality, and type to authentically capture high school talent based on historical real-world data. represent the different resources available to schools, ensuring the top schools can blanket the country, while smaller schools will need to be more targeted with their approach, and make the transfer portal feel authentically unpredictable. In College Football 25, we are introducing a new staged recruiting experience built around 3 distinct phases: discovery, pitch, and close. Just like the real world, every recruiting will be in a different stage of the process. Where they are in the process will dictate how you interact with them and the level of engagement they require. Recruiting will begin with the discovery stage. In this stage, you are finding out what prospects to target, what their skills are, and what they care about most. This stage is all about uncovering information about the recruit as quickly as possible. The sooner you can discover how well they align with your program, the better, as time is of the essence. Once a recruit announces their top 5 schools, it's time to pitch. During the pitch phase, you are selling the recruit on your program and what you offer. How well your school aligns with their motivations will determine how successful you are. The final stage is close. This is when you bring your recruit in for an official visit and attempt to leave a lasting impression about your program. If the visit goes well, you'll make huge gains with the recruit and possibly secure a verbal commitment following the visit. Ultimately, the recruit will make their final decision on National Signing Day. So here are the motivations of these recruits that you'll have to worry about. Playing time, playing style, championship contender, program tradition, and then so you'll get into campus lifestyle, stadium atmosphere, pro potential. Brand exposure is another one I want to talk about. This grades a team's overall brand recognition, the potential NIL opportunities a player could get at the school, and how often the school plays in primetime games. Then you got academic prestige, conference prestige, coach stability, athletic facilities, and proximity to home. All of those were in previous games, so nothing new there. They're measured pretty much the same way. So in Championship Contender, they use a combination of your top 25 poll ranking, team prestige, and an assessment of your current roster quality with Bud Elliott's blue chip ratio. Love that they added that into the game. That looks at the percentage of your roster that is made up of 4- and 5-star players. And that takes all of the 4- and 5-stars on your roster and divides it by the total number of players on your roster. Most grades update dynamically throughout the season, while some only update at the end of every season. It's important to keep tabs on your grades throughout the season and how you are trending, because a slide in your grades could trigger decommitments from verbally committed recruits or a sudden transfer portal exodus at the end of the season. I love that you can have decommitments in this game. Absolutely love it. It's something that I wish was a thing in 2014, but I don't know how often recruits were decommitting and flipping as they are now, but that's the way college football recruiting is now. Guys are constantly committing and decommitting and flipping their recruitments, so I love that it's in the game. Your grades also play a pivotal role in recruiting and will determine how well your pitches land with a recruit. The My School report will show your grades that were positively or negatively impacted by your actions in the last week, as well as any grades that have players who are at risk of transferring if it gets too low. Love that they update you about this, because then you can focus on it so you don't lose guys at the end of the season. So they go into talking about how the regionality of some of the pipelines affects what kind of recruits you're going to get. So, for example, Southern California is known for producing great quarterback talent, while East Texas consistently produces some of the best wide receivers in the country. However, they didn't stop there. They wanted to go deeper to ensure they were capturing the authenticity of high school talent. So while East Texas is known for producing great wide receivers, they're more specifically known for how big and physical their receivers are. As a result, you're going to see bigger and more physical receivers coming out of East Texas, whereas South Florida is going to produce incredibly fast deep threats who have a smaller size. I love that. It's these little details that I'm talking about that are going to make this game so special. They paid attention to the game of college football and the actual data that they have access to, and they made a game around it. It's just so amazing what they were able to do because of the time they took to go in depth, and how that takes the game from great to elite. So 5-star prospect is going to care more about getting to the next level, winning championships, growing their brand with NIL opportunities than a 2-star will. By contrast, a 2-star is more likely to care about staying close to home, coach stability, and academics. So this is all to say, if you're at a lower program, you're going to have to focus more on regionality than going after 5-stars. It's not going to, it might be near impossible to get them because you just don't meet some of their criteria, but you might be able to get a few 4-stars that are a little bit lower. So every recruit has 3 ideal pitch motivations, but one of those could also be a deal breaker. Deal breakers represent a motivation that a recruit is extremely passionate about and will not budge on. If you do not satisfy their deal breaker, they will not talk to you. Additionally, a deal breaker stays with a player forever, so once they are on your roster, they will have the same deal breaker that they had when you recruited them to your school. So that was a thing in NCAA 14, deal breakers. What wasn't is that it stays on as they progress. So if a guy is playing time, but he doesn't play well to start, and you sit him, he might transfer out because he's not getting as much playing time as he thought he was going to. So those are things that you have to keep in mind, as you have these guys on your roster and where the whole roster management thing comes into play. Here we talk more about the pipeline. So I've mentioned it a few times, but now we actually get into them. Florida is broken into 3 different pipelines. You have North Florida, Central Florida, and South Florida. So it's not just one state. All of those places have different players. Similarly, Metro Atlanta is its own pipeline. It absolutely has to be. New York and New Jersey were combined to become a single pipeline. New Jersey has a lot of great talent. New York, not so much. So combine them, make them one. I like that. That's just good. That's good practice, I think. There are 50 total pipelines in college football 25, so you really don't lose them because you had one for every single state in NCAA 14. So great job, maintaining the 50 pipelines, but making it in a way that makes sense. So in order to create these pipelines, they looked at every school's recruiting class in each of the last 10 years to identify which parts of the country they primarily recruit in. With our newly shaped pipelines, the next step was to look at every school's recruiting classes each of the last 10 years to identify which parts of the country they primarily recruit in. Using this data, we developed a tiered ranking system to represent how strong a school is in a given pipeline. Each pipeline has 5 levels, and every school was given a pipeline level based on historical data. The higher your pipeline level, the stronger your influence is in the region. This will boost a recruit's initial interest in your school and the impact of your pitches. I love the idea of tier pipelines because while you may have the same pipeline, so let's say you have Metro Atlanta as a pipeline, chances are that Georgia is going to be infinitely higher on some of those guys' lists, whereas, say, if you're Clemson, you're going to have Metro Atlanta. It's just not going to be to the level of Georgia. A school's pipeline level will never change, which ensures that schools who are historically strong recruiters in a given region will always have an advantage. For example, Florida has historically dominated recruiting in Central Florida in areas like Lakeland, Tampa, and Orlando. This also accurately reflects the challenges of recruiting to a smaller school that is not located in or adjacent to a strong pipeline. This one is a little bit interesting to me, and I'm not sure if I love it quite yet, because pipelines change. Michigan didn't always recruit New Jersey very well. They have in recent years, and so New Jersey is one of their pipeline states. But what happens when I'm at a smaller school and all of a sudden I'm a 6-star prestige and 5-star players want to come play for me that are all across the country? Like, say I'm coaching at Eastern Michigan, and all of a sudden I'm a 6-star prestige, I'm in the Big Ten, and I'm trying to recruit Metro Atlanta. I can never get that as a pipeline, because that's what it sounds like. I don't know if I love that. We'll see, but I do like the fact that it makes it harder to recruit at a small school and that you can't just easily build up into some elite program. You have to earn it. Like, you have to actually earn recruits. So my big thing has always been that recruiting in NCAA 14 was way too easy, and I wanted a challenge. While it's still possible to land 4 stars at a small school, it will require the right fit and a heavy investment of resources and time. Our hope is that you will no longer have to make custom house rules in your online dynasty to prevent your friend from cheating the system. It's rewarding to turn a program around. It's not like, oh, look I did it. Okay, what's next? You're not going to get tired of it so easily. But it does mean that recruits from Atlanta are more likely to have schools from the Southeast in their initial top schools. However, some prospects will look to leave home and play for a school further away if schools outside the region better fit their needs or if they don't consider any schools in the area good enough for them. Depending on the motivations and location of a recruit, it is possible for them to be open to hearing from any school or already narrowed down to a top 8 or even the top 5. So if they're already to a top 5, you skip the first phase and you're already into the pitch phase. That's also interesting too. You could be starting our recruitment right away. So I really like that too. After advancing the week, you will be shown a recruiting summary of any changes in recruit statuses, so that you can quickly identify where you need to spend your time that week. You kind of got that a little bit in NCAA 14, but it wasn't as dynamic as this one will be. It just showed you that you were in a battle, or if a guy visited, how many visit points he got. But this one will really go in depth, and I really like that. Another quality of life thing that, you didn't have to add, but they did, and it shows how much they cared about it. How many players you need at a position will vary by scheme. This is also very cool. For example, if you run a pass-heavy offensive scheme like the veer and shoot, you will need 10 wide receivers, whereas a pro-style offense only needs 6. Your scheme is tied to your playbook, and the only way to change it is by changing your offensive and defensive playbooks, which can be done at any time. As you continue to target and sign players, your team needs will update accordingly. This is also very cool. I think NCAA 14 had this. I'm not entirely sure. I never really paid attention, but I like the idea that each offensive playbook it has different needs. And so if you're looking to recruit a bunch of wide receivers, well, hopefully you're running a pass-heavy system. Whereas if, like they mentioned, if you're a pro style, you're not going to need that many wide receivers because they won't have to rotate on and off the field as much. So really like that as well. Teams with higher prestige will have more recruiting hours each week. This is meant to model the recruiting resources a program has, with higher tier programs having significantly more resources available to them. In the preseason, a 5-star program will have 1,000 recruiting hours compared to only 350 hours for a 1-star program. That to me is another one of those things where it's just like, yes, that makes perfect sense. A 1-star program should not have, 100 less hours than a 5-star program. They have so many more resources, the 5-star program does, that it should be that wide of a gap. The time of year also impacts your recruiting hours. During the preseason and in the offseason recruiting, you do not have to prepare for a game each Saturday. As a result, you have significantly more time to spend on recruiting than you do in the heart of the regular season. In addition to the maximum recruiting hours you can spend in a week, each prospect has a maximum number of hours that you can spend on them in a given week. The default maximum is 50 hours, but this can be increased to a maximum of 70 hours with the always be recruiting ability for that position. Selecting a recruit allows you to dive in deeper and begin interaction with them. At the top of the screen, you will see bio information about the recruit as well as a large bar with stages on it. This bar represents the recruit's overall progression towards each stage and ultimately committing to a team. The dark area of the bar is how much the recruit progressed week over week. Within the Overview tab, you can see a summary of where each school stands. Similar to the top bar, each school has their own bar, which represents their progression with the recruit. The top school listed is a zoomed-in snapshot of the recruit's progression to the next stage. Once a team fills the bar, the recruit will progress to the next stage, and the top school's bar will reset. Any teams below the cut line will be locked out and no longer able to talk with the recruit. Before you start offering scholarships and dedicating your limited recruiting hours and resources to prospects, it is important to make sure you're targeting the right ones for your program. During the preseason, you are only able to scout and offer scholarships, the same as NCAA 14. It's a great time to scout players and ensure you're targeting the right prospects. In College Football 25, we're introducing a new scouting system designed to represent the ambiguity and progressive discovery of a high school player's skills. Each attribute has 4 states of scouting. Unscouted. This is represented by question marks and is the default state for every recruit. Partially scouted. At this stage, you will see a horizontal bar appear. The left side of the bar is 0 and the right side is 99. Within the bar is a gold zone that covers 25% of the bar space. The player's true rating for that attribute is somewhere in this range. Mostly scouted. Once you have mostly scouted a player's attribute, you have a much clearer picture of the prospect. At this point, the gold zone only covers 10% of the bar. Fully scouted. When a rating is fully scouted, you know exactly how good the prospect is, and their exact rating is revealed. Each scouting action will also reveal physical and mental abilities. As a result of our discussions, the primary time you will unlock a prospect's development is during National Signing Day. However, if you only minor in your ability, there is a chance you will learn their development trait when you spend time with them during their official visit. I love this. You're not going to know the guy until you get face-to-face time with him. So, just calling him over the phone or DMing him should not tell you the development trait. I really do like that addition as well. The coaches we talked to also described how the level of ambiguity and uncertainty around a player's skill set is higher for lower star players. This is because of how much visibility the top prospects get from social media, scouts, and high-profile camps. Conversely, lower star rated recruits generally have less visibility, which leads to a greater level of uncertainty and unknown what their true skill is. This creates an opportunity to find a diamond in the rough. We have modeled this uncertainty and unknown with their bust gem system. When scouting a player, there's a chance you identify that their true skill is actually better or worse than their star rating indicates. For example, a 4-star bust is really a 3-star quality prospect, while a 4-star gem has the skill level of a 5-star. Of course, even if a player is a bust, it doesn't necessarily mean they are a bad player. A 5-star bust is still going to be pretty darn good. This system creates a lot of variance in lower star rated prospects and provides you with the opportunity to build your program with high quality players who slip through the cracks of the recruiting rankings. Landing top blue chip prospects is incredibly difficult, so this can be a highly effective recruiting strategy to build your program. In stage 1, there are 5 recruiting actions you can use to uncover information about the prospect. In addition to uncovering information, you will also gain some influence with the prospect. Each action has a recruiting hour cost and corresponding benefit. The more hours you spend on a recruit, the faster you will uncover information and the more influences you will gain. You can increase how fast you uncover information and the amount of influence you earn with the most influential ability, which gives a bonus to recruiting actions. So here are the 5 actions. You can offer a scholarship. With a scholarship, you will gain a small weekly influence bonus with the prospect after offering them the scholarship. You will not be able to bring them on campus for a visit or receive a commitment from a prospect until you've offered them a scholarship. So it's very important to offer them one early on. Searching social media. You spend time scrolling through the player's social media to learn a little bit more about them. This will give you a very small amount of influence when they see you like their story. Just be careful not to like an image from 3 years ago. That was a good one. DM the player. Message the player directly on social media to start a conversation and learn more information about them. DMs will give you a small amount of influence as you start to build that relationship. Contact family and friends. Make a few phone calls to the player's family and close friends to learn a lot more about what the prospect values. This action will also gain a significant amount of influence with the prospect when word gets back to them that you called and when grandma starts raving about you and your program at Thanksgiving dinner. Send the house. From the recruiting coordinator to every other coach on your staff, send every available resource you have at a prospect to gain as much influence with them as possible. So after the recruit narrows their top schools to 5, it is time to begin pitching the prospect on your school and what you have to offer. By this point, you should have a good amount of information about the prospect and what they care about. The more information you have, the more surgical you can be with your pitch. If you do not have much information about the prospect, you will effectively be flying blind and risk pitching them on something they do not care about. If your pitch does not align with their motivations, it can actually have an adverse effect on your perception of you and your program. So in pitching a prospect, there are 2 different types that you can use. There's a soft sell that awards a moderate amount of influence when choosing the correct pitch. It also limits the downside risk and penalty of pitching the prospect on something they don't care about. This is best when you have little idea what the recruit is motivated about. Hard sell. This provides the most influence when choosing the correct pitch, but it also comes with the largest penalty if you pitch the wrong thing. It is best to hard sell the recruit when you know what their ideal pitch is or if you are desperate and just hoping for the best. After you select the pitch type, you will then select your pitch. Each pitch is a collection of 3 motivations and there are 20 pitches in total. For example, the Sunday Bomb pitch sells a recruit on your school being a championship contender, its conference prestige, and your school's track record sending kids to the next level. How well the pitch aligns with the prospect's motivations, as well as your associated My School grades, will ultimately determine how well your pitch lands with the prospect. You can increase the impact of your My School grades with the upsell ability. If your school does not perfectly align with their ideal pitch, or if you're looking for a way to get a competitive advantage, you can sway the prospect and change their motivations. Successfully swaying a prospect will give them a second ideal pitch that is only available to you. It is possible that the second ideal pitch also creates a third ideal pitch combination as well. Your chances of successfully swaying a prospect increase the more overlap there is between their ideal pitch motivations and the pitch you are trying to sway them on. It is possible to sway them on a pitch with 0 motivation overlap, but it is a very low probability chance of success. I love that they have this in the game. It's actually going to add some strategy on pitching these guys. You're not just going to be able to throw points at them. You have to think about, what do you know about this guy? What works with your school and how you can sell him on your school, on your program. The final step in the recruiting journey is to close. This is when you bring the prospect in for an official visit and attempt to leave a lasting impression with them. In order to schedule a visit with a prospect, they must be down to the school's top 5, and you need to have offered them a scholarship. A recruit can take an official visit to a school when they are on a bye or they have a home game. Additionally, schools can only host up to 4 recruits in a single week. This is a big difference. You used to be able to schedule as many recruits as you wanted in NCAA 14. Now you have to be a lot more strategic with it. You're not going to be able to bring every guy in a single game. You're going to have to spread them out, and I like that a lot. When scheduling a visit with a prospect, you will be charged 40 recruiting hours. The cost to schedule a visit does not count towards the maximum number of hours you can allocate to the recruit in a week, so this allows you to continue your normal recruiting of the prospect in the same week you schedule a visit. So then the visit's broken down into 2 main parts, scheduling and activity. Waiting to bring the recruit in for a big-time rivalry game late in the season could have a lot of upside, but it also carries risk since there's a chance the prospect will commit somewhere else prior to your visit date. Who you play the day of the game also matters. Every visit during the regular season comes with a set of game day stakes, which determine the influence bonus you will receive with the recruit for winning the game and the potential downside for a loss. The stakes are set by the importance and visibility of the game the prospect will attend. Playing a lower-tier opponent will provide very little upside and major downside if you lose. Conversely, playing your rival, who is also a top 5 team, will have the potential of leaving a lasting impression. Of course, you can avoid any risk entirely by scheduling during a bye week, but then you get no in-game related bonuses. The other prospects who are visiting that week can also have a positive or negative impact based on whether or not the positions are complementary or competitive. After setting which date the prospect is going to visit, the next step is to select what they're going to do on their visit. There are 14 activities a recruit can do during a visit, and each activity maps to a prospect motivation. Similar to pitches, the alignment of the recruit's interest level in that activity and your My School grade will determine how much recruit enjoys the activity. Nailing the visit can often be the difference between bringing in a 5-star class or being left at the altar on signing day. If things go well, there's a chance the recruit will verbally commit to your school following the visit. While you should feel good about securing a verbal commitment, it is critical you stay on top of things until they sign their letter of intent on signing day. If a prospect is verbally committed and they have a deal breaker, they will decommit from your school if you fall below the required grade threshold prior to signing day. Once a player has signed on signing day, you have nothing to worry about until they arrive on campus, and your next challenge is keeping them happy and out of the transfer portal. Speaking of the transfer portal, guys are going to leave because of deal breakers. High overall players may look to go pro and enter the draft if they've been in school for 3 or more years. Players who are entering the pro draft will display the round they are projected to be drafted in. But once a player has decided to leave, you will have an opportunity to persuade them to stay. The chance to successfully persuade a player to stay is determined by their overall and your coach prestige. Higher overall players will be harder to convince than low overall players. But you got to keep in mind, you only have a limited number of persuasion attempts. The number of persuasion attempts you have is determined by your coach prestige. The higher your coach prestige, the more attempts you will have. You can increase the number of persuasion attempts with the gift or gab. You can increase the number of persuasion attempts with the gift of gab ability, and you can increase your chance of successfully persuading a player to stay with the roster retainer ability. Both of these abilities are available in the program builder archetype. While players have the opportunity to leave via the transfer portal every season, you will also have the opportunity to make roster changes. Every offseason, you are required to get back down to 85 players on your roster. Unfortunately, that means if you are over the 85-man limit, you will be forced to encourage some players to transfer and find a new home. If you are at or below 85 players on your roster, you can still encourage players to transfer in order to make room for new players the next season. And no, you can't encourage the brand new freshman you just signed to find a new home the moment he gets on campus. Once all players have decided whether to go or stay, the transfer portal will officially open at the start of the offseason recruiting. Offseason recruiting lasts 4 weeks in total, and transfers will make their final decision at the end of it on National Signing Day. Just like in real life, this is a chaotic 4 weeks where players are committing quickly and team rosters are rapidly changing. Teams will have to constantly make quick decisions, sometimes with limited information. Do you want to continue pursuing high school recruits? Are there transfers who can immediately improve your roster? How much time do you want to spend discovering transfers' motivations and scouting them versus selling them on your program? How soon do you want to bring the transfer in for a visit? I love how they make you think about all these things. It's not just, I have 2 recruits left, let me put 10,000 points into this guy because I literally can't do anything else. Like, you actually have to think about things and make sacrifices in some places to get advantages in other places. Every transfer is given a star based on their overall and has a national, state, and position ranking just like high school prospects. Since people change over time, transfers are assigned a new ideal pitch and motivations. Every player in the transfer portal has the same deal breaker that caused them to transfer originally, though. So you got to keep that in mind. Their new ideal pitch will include their deal breaker motivation, and it will be relevant to transfers and their unique needs. After their new ideal pitch and motivations have been set, transfers will evaluate every school and generate a top schools list, just like high school prospects do. They will look at how their motivations align with each school and adjust for pipelines and proximity to home. Since 4- and 5-star prospects are in the highest demand and they know more concretely what they are looking for, they will only consider 5 schools. If you're not in their top 5, you will not be able to talk to them. Lower-star prospects will vary in terms of the number of schools they are considering. Some will be completely open to you, while others will have as few as 3 schools they are considering. Regardless of where they start, the process of recruiting transfer is fast, and you will need to make quick decisions. Your interactions with a transfer will be very similar to interacting with a high school recruit. Depending on their stage, you will add recruiting actions, pitch your school, bring them to campus on a visit, and try to close a deal. When evaluating whether to target transfers or high school prospects, schools will look at each position on their roster throughout the season and monitor their immediate needs. If a position group does not meet their requirements, they will hold a spot on the recruiting board for an off-season transfer who they believe can come in and be an immediate contributor. Don't be surprised if you see teams finish early signing day with a light recruiting class in preparation for a big recruiting push in the transfer portal. Of course, once they see the players who are actually in the portal, their priorities may change. Having a need at left tackle is nice and all during the season, but if there's a 5-star transfer quarterback who wants to come to your school, why turn them down? There's an early signing day and National Signing Day. So early signing day will take place at the start of bowl season after the regular season has been completed, and National Signing Day takes place 7 weeks after the national championship, just like real life. On signing day, any players who have verbally committed to a school prior to signing day will sign, meaning they can no longer decommit. The majority of prospects will commit prior to early signing day, but some recruitments may last late into the cycle. Those prospects, along with transfers, will ultimately sign their letter of intent on National Signing Day. Throughout recruiting, you can view the team recruiting rankings in the Top Classes tab of the Recruiting Hub. Top Classes allows you to view the team recruiting rankings for high school prospects, transfers, or combined. You can also filter by conference. Any recruits who are unsigned after National Signing Day will stick around and become walk-ons in the offseason. Love it. There is no more of this, oh, this guy didn't commit, what happened to him? He's just not playing football anymore? Like, where did he go? That was just one of the more annoying things in NCAA 14. Another quality of life thing. They've just knocked it out of the park with this. They're making our lives easier, and they're giving us a more fun experience. The amount a player progresses in the offseason is influenced by their school year, coach abilities, and their development trait. To simulate the real-world difference in physical maturity between a freshman and a senior, younger players like rising sophomores will take a larger leap during the offseason than a rising senior. Similarly, a player's coaching staff will have a significant impact on their development. For example, motivators can have the pay-it-forward ability, which awards bonus XP to a position group every time a player at that position is drafted in the first 3 rounds. Motivators can also have the put-and-work ability, which increases off-season development for players in a particular position group. Progression will then be further modified by the player's development trait. So in EA College Football 25, there are 4 player development traits: normal, impact, star, and elite. And as you know, those are just basically how much they progress, how much progression they get in offseason and during the season. Once a player is on your roster, the development trait is known and can be seen in the player card, which can be assessed by pressing triangle or Y on a player on the roster screen. As opposed to progressing each attribute individually, for example, trucking, players will instead progress an entire skill group. A skill group is a collection of related attributes. For example, the running back power skill group includes trucking, strength, stiff arm, toughness, jumping, and injury. So it's kind of like how Madden has made a change recently. I like that a lot. Every skill group has a max level of 10. Each time you upgrade a skill group, it will increase 1 level and progress all of the attributes in the skill group. With that being said, some players will have a skill group max level or cap that is less than 10. Skill group caps can be thought of as a player's max potential in that particular area. These will vary by player, skill group, position, and archetype. Once a skill group has hit the cap, it can no longer be upgraded unless the coach has the archetype. Once a skill group has hit the cap, it can no longer be upgraded unless the coach has the architect archetype and the limitless or put a ring on it abilities. Limitless provides a chance to increase a random skill cap every time the player levels up, and put a ring on it provides a chance to increase their highest skill cap after winning a conference or national championship. While progressing, players will look to upgrade their physical abilities if they meet the rating requirement. Every tier of a physical ability has an associated attribute requirement. For example, in order to have a platinum workhorse ability, a player must have 95 toughness. Dynasty players cannot upgrade their mental abilities. So if a player does not come in as a freshman with a particular mental ability, there is no way for them to earn that ability through progression. Every team will have at least 1 offensive and 1 defensive player who's an impact player. However, unlike the past, there is no limit on the number of impact players a team can have. This is perfect. Ohio State offensively has 8 impact players on offense every single year. There should be no limit to what they have, just because they're all very good. They shouldn't penalize the guys who, are just great and not elite. So 12-team playoff is also in the game. We created unique logic for our college football playoff poll to model how we anticipate the rankings to look in the new format. Generating a believable opinion-based poll is no easy feat, especially one where we are projecting what may happen versus being able to use the real-world results as our reference point. You are what your record says you are is a misnomer in college football, so factors like school and conference prestige can impact where a school finds itself in the CFP poll. Each week of the season, the coaches, media, and CFP polls, along with the 12-team bracket update based on the most recent results, and the final rankings and bracket are revealed following the completion of conference championship games. Wow, that was a lot. It certainly wasn't all of it, but at this point, I feel like I've talked your ear off, and we've gone pretty in depth into what this game mode has to offer, and I'm so freaking excited for what's to come. There's so much strategy, there's so much depth and detail in this game mode, and this isn't even talking about the stuff on the field. This is really just all the off the field stuff that this trailer and deep dive talked about. And I mean, come on, could you possibly be more excited for what's to come in the next couple of weeks? I know I really can't. But yeah, this is going to be so much fun. Really can't wait. Thank you all so much for watching. See ya.